When Marvel set out to make Iron Man in 2008, they were gambling on a lesser-known hero with no guarantee of box office success. To hedge their bets, they cast Terrence Howard as James Rhodes before anyone else, banking on his recent Oscar nomination and reputation as one of Hollywood's hottest rising stars. Robert Downey Jr. was cast later and was viewed as a risky choice, weighed down by past arrests and far from a proven box office draw. But once the film hit, the dynamic flipped overnight. Downey's performance as Tony Stark turned him into a superstar and the face of the MCU, while Howard was pushed into the background. By the time Iron Man 2 rolled around, Downey was renegotiating his salary upwards, and Howard was being asked to take a massive pay cut. What began as Marvel betting big on Howard ended with him losing his place in the franchise entirely, the result of behind-the-scenes tension, salary disputes, and a reputation that made him difficult to work with. To see how it all unraveled, let's take a look at how Terrence Howard became the first star to be recast in the MCU. Contrary to how most MCU films are cast today, the role of Tony Stark's best friend James Rhodes was cast long before the title character of Stark himself. In the mid-2000s, Terrence Howard was a hot actor, having starred in Best Picture winner Crash and earning a Best Actor nomination for Hustle and Flow, establishing him as both critically respected and capable of delivering charisma and complexity. Marvel, looking to establish credibility for its first independent production and hedge its bets at the box office, saw Howard as the perfect anchor in the role of Rhodey. Locking him in early promised both star power and prestige, but it came at a cost. Howard's initial salary for Iron Man was higher than anyone else in the cast, an unusual inversion of the typical Hollywood hierarchy that usually privileges the title character. Howard then leveraged his position to advocate for Robert Downey Jr. in the part of Tony Stark, challenging Marvel, who were hesitant due to Downey's history of drug addiction and arrests, which made him difficult to insure. During negotiations, Howard reportedly offered to forgo part of the salary to help secure Downey's audition, saying, "Instead of the $4.5 million you want to give me, why don't you take $1 million for the bond for him and let him audition?" The studio agreed, and Downey went on to play Tony Stark, becoming a cultural icon and one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. Not only that, but the gamble paid off spectacularly, as Iron Man was a huge box office success, with Downey's performance often cited as the film's key strength. With a sequel on the horizon, Marvel knew just where to go next, as Iron Man had already set up potential storylines to be fully realized in future installments. Rhodey's quip, while looking at the sleek silver Mark II suit, "Next time, baby," teased Rhodes' eventual transformation into War Machine. While this line was a playful nod to comic readers, it also served a practical function. It gave Marvel a clear direction for the sequel, and planted the expectation that Rhodey would graduate from sidekick to armored hero, setting the stage for a bigger role in Iron Man 2 and beyond. It also reinforced Marvel's long-term strategy of treating every film as a stepping stone to the next, building anticipation through teases and setups within the films. Because of this setup, Howard was naturally expecting a much more central and significant role in the eventual sequel. By the time Iron Man 2 went into development, Downey was in a strong position to negotiate his contract. His reported initial payday of $500,000 for Iron Man was modest relative to his new star power, but following the film's success, his salary reportedly jumped to $10 million up front for the sequel, with future MCU appearances inflating his earnings further with back-end participation. Howard, by contrast, faced the opposite challenge. During production of the first film, director Jon Favreau was reportedly dissatisfied with Howard's portrayal of the character and demeanor on set, with scenes trimmed in post or completely reshot. Howard already had a reputation for being difficult in Hollywood, reportedly being aggressive about scenes being cut on The Cosby Show and resisting direction on The Best Man. Insiders often described him as a hothead who needed to take control over his environment. Favreau's frustration with Howard influenced early script decisions for Iron Man 2, with Rhodey's role intentionally being reduced, in sharp contrast to the promise of War Machine set up by the first film. When Howard entered negotiations for his return in the sequel, he was confronted with a steep pay cut, reportedly around 50 to 80%, and a significantly diminished role. Howard called the experience the surprise of a lifetime, and the combination of a shrinking presence in the film and pay cut proved to be a deal breaker, as he would elect not to return. It's also worth noting that Howard wasn't the only actor to push back against Marvel's salary offers. He was just the only one that was willing to walk away. Marvel had a reputation for being notoriously cheap in this era. Nearly every major actor on Iron Man 2 had difficulties closing deals. Even though he had been teased in the post-credit scene of the first film, Samuel L. Jackson almost didn't return as Nick Fury for the sequel, after he was made what he felt was a lowball offer. Mickey Rourke also nearly walked away from playing Whiplash, because Marvel wouldn't initially meet his salary demands after having received an Oscar nod for The Wrestler, as the studio has a reputation for pinching pennies with actors, even as their films rake in record profits. Howard didn't just blame the studio. He's also expressed frustration with Downey over the years, lamenting that his friend got carried away with his ego, and didn't intervene with the studio to help preserve Howard's role and pay back the favor. This is just one example of Downey getting lost in his own fame and leaving his co-stars in the dust. For example, during development of The Avengers, he told writer-director Joss Whedon that the film needed to be centered around Tony Stark, effectively making him the star, and negating the rest of the cast as supporting roles. Whedon would push back and rebalance the script to ensure the film was an ensemble piece. While Howard felt personally abandoned by Downey, it's worth noting that even the most influential actor has limited sway over studio decisions, and the two seemingly eventually reconciled, with Howard posting a photo alongside Downey in 2016 at a wedding, clarifying that any past tension had been resolved. Marvel now faced the challenge of recasting Rhodey. Fortunately, there was a straightforward solution: Don Cheadle, who had been the studio's original choice for the part back in 2007. Howard himself later confirmed that Cheadle had been Marvel's first pick for Rhodey during development of the first film, but Howard's agent had aggressively lobbied for him, successfully knocking Cheadle out of the running. With the Iron Man 2 role vacant, Marvel simply reverted to its initial instinct. Cheadle brought gravitas to match Downey, could deliver humor without undermining his authority as the lead character, and had Ward's credibility. But it wasn't a simple casting. The studio made Cheadle an offer with a tight deadline, 2 hours to decide before they would move on to the next person. At the time, Cheadle was at his child's birthday party and would have to consider the offer while playing laser tag with a bunch of kids. The offer demanded a 6-picture commitment, with little clarity on what Rhodey's role would entail in the future. Despite these uncertainties, Cheadle accepted, beginning a 15-year journey through the MCU. Iron Man 2 acknowledged the recasting with a line engineered to diffuse potential backlash. When Tony notices Rhodey at his court hearing, Rhodey quips, "It's me, I'm here, let's deal with it and move on." It was a meta wink at the audience, signaling that the character had been recast, but it shouldn't distract you from the story, and to just get over it. In the years since, Howard's personal pursuits have done little to challenge the perception that Marvel made the right choice. Most notably, he developed Terryology, a self-devised system of mathematics in which he claims, among other things, that 1 × 1 = 2. Howard has lectured on Terryology at universities and public events, often leaving audiences confused with explanations that defy conventional logic. However, Howard's story of being pushed out by the Marvel machine is not unique in the story of the franchise. Bruce Banner was originally played by Edward Norton in 2008's The Incredible Hulk, only to be replaced with Mark Ruffalo when the character returned in The Avengers. Similar to Howard, Norton's recasting was due to him being difficult to work with. Norton's exit, like Howard's, reinforced that Marvel is willing to cut their losses, no matter how talented or bankable the actor is, if they won't play by their rules. Unlike Norton, however, Howard's off-screen reputation has been marked by far more troubling allegations than eccentric math theories and resistance to collaboration. Howard has faced 2 separate accusations of domestic violence across different relationships, and his ex-wife has an active restraining order against him. He's also had 2 separate charges of assault filed against him in the early 2000s, so it's also possible that Marvel wanted to avoid him tainting their franchise by having such a figure in the spotlight. The irony, of course, is that more than a decade later, Marvel would face exactly this nightmare scenario when Jonathan Majors, positioned as the next big villain of the MCU, was convicted of assault, causing his character to be completely written out of the narrative, and for their multiverse plans to be completely changed. Ultimately, Marvel's decision to replace Howard with Don Cheadle reflected both a return to the studio's original casting vision and a practical solution for sustaining Rhodey's role within a tightly controlled cinematic universe. Howard's early contributions to the MCU, however, including advocating for Downey and lending early prestige, remain significant, but his departure underscores the realities of blockbuster filmmaking. Even immensely talented actors with star power must be stable, reliable, and collaborative. In this light, Marvel's choice, while controversial at the time, now appears prescient. By sidestepping an unstable and eccentric actor like Howard, whose behavior had the potential to stir controversy, the studio cemented Cheadle as a reliable anchor for Rhodey, preserving the trajectory of one of the most successful film franchises in history. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of Hollywood's untold stories and unmade movies.